The first screech was ours. Joss shouldered through the gap in the chain link, and the fence sang the sound of metal shaving metal, a long, wet knife dragged across a wire throat. The rain made everything louder and smaller at once. It tightened the world to our hoods, and the lamp-black shapes of the trees and the old station crouched among them like something that had been taught to kneel and never told it could stop. We laughed because we were 6 and stupid and had made the choice already. Me, Joss, Hannah, Cam, Levi and Ollie. And when you've chosen the wrong thing, you soften it by performing joy. We passed our packs through, and I went last, pressing the wire so it wouldn't cry again. It cried anyway, a shorter scrape, as if memorizing our pitch. The country park looks harmless by day. It pretends at family and birdsong and laminated signs, a history printed in cheerful fonts. During the war, they'd hollowed the ground and networked the rails and folded the factories into the woods, so enemy pilots would see only green. Later, they'd stripped it all back until the land was a scar you could picnic on. By daylight, the old station is a ruin, barely deserving the name. A platform lip-slick with algae, rail lines drowned in turf, bricks furred in moss till you think they're a native species. The map says derelict. The fence says dangerous. The rain said we could be invisible if we would only keep still. But the station remembers. At night, it gets its edges back. Someone long before us had levered a slab aside, leaving a low stair into brick and earth. We'd practiced the route in daylight months ago. Hannah had found it on a forum that spelled danger with an exclamation point. The slab took 2 to shift then. Tonight it took only a breath. Water ran in slicks over the edges. The air below had the slow cold of cellars and books shut for a very long time. I could smell old paper and metal sleeping. We went down with our phones in our mouths, our lights clamped between our teeth like we were keeping secrets from even ourselves. The stair wobbled under moss and the fine, loose grit of a century of feet and years that had eroded into dust. The bunker room opened like a throat. All rooms underground feel like the inside of a word. This one felt like a word whispered by someone you trusted once. Brick ribbing, paint in fish-scale curls, a desk with every drawer pillaged generations ago. A wall where a map had hung so long the outline of its absence was a map of absence. And, at the back, the short, slumped shoulder of a second opening to a narrower chute that smelled like rain itself had learned to rot. We knew the space, measured it with talk the first time, then with silence. It was enough to hold 6 foolish people who wanted to be a story they'd tell later with edits. We turned our phones to airplane mode and switched off our head torches. We gathered in a ragged circle of backpacks, avoiding the deepest corner of the circle, as that would be seen as either pretentious or brave, and both would be lies. Above us, the rain drummed out long messages on the platform, which resonated as it hit the fence. I pressed my palm against the wall until I could feel its ancient chill against the pulse in my wrist. If you waited, the cold felt less like an uncomfortable sensation and more like a kind of slow contemplation. "Bunker," Levi said finally, and the word did what it always did. Put a lid on things, name them sealed. He had a way of sounding like he was reading a label on a jar. Joss shivered the last of his laughter out and pretended it was rain trapped in his coat. Cam took out a roll-up and didn't light it, a ritual for the hands. Hannah clicked her thumbnail against her front tooth, the little metronome of nerves she denies are nerves. Ollie lay back and said he could hear trains under the rain. I told myself there was nothing here to fear. This country doesn't do big predators. It does foxes, shy deer, cats that belong to no one, and horses if you go looking. People are the worst thing you'll meet. And at this hour, the only people who'd be out in the rain would be us and a ranger underpaid enough to pretend he didn't see us if we kept quiet. That's what I told myself while the dark settled like a heavy blanket and the wall kept thinking in the slow, cold language of brick. I don't remember sleep beginning. Either I blinked and 4 hours happened, or I never stopped hearing the rain. Time in buried rooms is always a trick. One clock is your body, and the other is the sound of the world trying not to be heard. The second screech pulled me upright by a string at the base of my skull. Same shape as before, metal grinding along a bruise, but shorter, dampened. A careful screech, like a rehearsal of ours. I nearly said, sorry, the way you say sorry when you knock a glass in someone else's house. Then the silence corrected me. None of us had moved. I felt the way you do when a teacher calls a name that is yours, but in a tone that isn't. The room had room for one noise only, and it had chosen that one. Lights, Hannah whispered. And then we did the opposite. A small choreography, fingers to switches, the patient click of plastic, 6 miniature suns extinguished in a circle, as if the room had been holding its breath for the chance to be exactly itself. Without the cones of our headlamps, the dark wasn't absence. It was detail I couldn't see yet. I sat still and felt the shape of my body redraw itself to fit less space. Above us, something moved. Not a clomp. Not heel-toe leather clacking an apology to stone. Not the squeal talk of rubber. Soft wet. A pad pressed to concrete and freed. A slight adhesive sound, repeated. The rhythm had a human patience to it without sounding human. Step, lift, step, lift. The rain thickened the silence between each unfelt footfall until those spaces became the thing I listened to. It came to the top of our stairs and stopped. The rectangle that would show outside light stayed a square of deeper black. No torch. No spill of the day from a split cloud. If you could hear a person thinking about whether to commit to a decision, you would have heard it then. The stairs made no sound. The breathing that demanded attention was my own. Levi's hand found my wrist and, without asking, borrowed my pulse to become a new and faster thing. Across the room, the little clack of Hannah's thumbnail against her tooth halted mid-tick. Ollie's roll-up paper whispered when his fingers closed, one dry, papery sound in a world of wet noise. I counted to 100 because that was the first number my fear offered me that had an end. At 80, I lost count and knew I would have to start again at 1, and that thought nearly made me laugh in a thin way that would not be a laugh if anyone heard it. No one spoke. Whispering is the language of fear, because your mouth wants to show the world you've become smaller. Whispering says, I can fit into this moment if it will spare me. We made no bargains out loud. When the steps came again, they were going away, the same pads, the same careful ungluing, receding from the stair toward the fence. Then the wall, oh God, the fence, complained again, but different, a shy, thinner song, as if a narrower shoulder had learned our mistake and refused to play it back full volume. A slight clatter, not dropping but something settling, a coil finishing a thought. Then nothing but rain, and the sudden brassy awareness of myself as a body with a heart that needed talking down. We waited for someone else to decide what we did next. Courage gets reviews. Patience goes uncredited, even in its best work. We had patience. We let the night resolve back into its raw materials. Water and stone and the sound of our clothes drying one thread at a time. The next sleep was not sleep so much as the sundering of attention. When my phone alarm wormed into my ear at 6, wasp buzz, ugly and bright, I had the clean sensation you get the morning after an argument. The feeling that the room you're in has kept talking without you, and you're the one who's meant to summarize it. We packed quickly. It's a liturgy, that kind of morning. Bags, zips, the insistence on jokes, the shiver that is rain, remembering you haven't earned warmth. We climbed the stairs into a milky day that had not yet remembered the sun. The rain had faded to a drizzle that felt like a fine net hung in the air. On the concrete above the stairs, our inbound prints muddied the grey into a crude painting. Our night reduced. Here, stop, breathe, joke, downward. There was a 7th trail. Heels, then toe ovals, long and narrow, the second toe the equal of the first, the way some feet are. Not small, not a child's. Bare. The prints came from the fence gap to the mouth of the stairs and stopped there, the toes curling a fraction over the edge, as if their owner had leaned in to look into a darkness that did not look back. The prints then turned, the neatest pivot, and went back the way they came. Exact spacing, exact path. No wandering to peer through smashed glass or to test the stubbornness of doors. It was as if the person had been a vector rather than a person at all. "Ranger?" Levi said, and made the word do far more than its job. No torch, so he doesn't give himself away. Sees the hole, knows better. Moves on his chin, lifted at the end of the sentence like he was adding a full stop to speech. Hannah didn't look at him. She kept staring at the prints, as if they were handwriting in a letter from someone who never knew her, but somehow wrote like she did. "In bare feet," she said. "In this." "Quiet that way," Joss said, and when he said it, he wasn't foolish so much as hopeful. "Hunters do it. Trackers. You can feel the ground." His voice had the fence's exact pitch for one long note. Cam swore he knew a bloke who ran ultras without shoes. Ollie offered the word hippie and then apologized to the rain. I wanted to touch the prints, but I didn't. There are mornings when superstition and pragmatism share a jacket. We wore it between us. We left. The fence whined when we slid through, and it was not our first screech, not our second. Close, yet wrong. The way a recording on a cheap phone never sounds like the room it was made in. We crossed the empty car park and turned ourselves back into more minor, less numerous things. Coffee, dry socks, the lie we'd tell later to make the story safe in a living room. I eagerly checked the park's social media feed, hoping for a quick update. I envisioned a captivating video with a lively caption, featuring a heartwarming story about kids, accompanied by an important safety reminder. However, to my surprise, the feed was quiet. The next day, there was still nothing. Then, on the following day, I spotted a delightful photo of a robin enjoying a worm, along with an interesting post about native grasses. Although I didn't see any late-night patrols or ranger messages urging us to respect our fences, I'm looking forward to continued connection and positive interactions within our vibrant community. In the shower that second morning, I shook red-brown grit from my jeans into the tub, the colour of rails after rain and neglect. On my left calf, high where a sleeve would be if legs wore sleeves, was a print I thought at first was blotched mud. 5 long ovals in a curve with a clean emptiness in the middle. Toes where toes would be. Too long and narrow for fingers. Wrong angle for my own foot. I scrubbed, and the mark ghosted, then went. If I'd been keeping a list, I wouldn't have written it down. I have always wanted my life to be the kind where lists are checked off, not the kind where lists are left open to the weather. The week seemed normal. Nights, though, the house made the little noises houses make when they realize you're holding your breath. And so they offer to keep theirs too. Somewhere, a pipe thudded. Once, a spoon in a mug touched china with the gentlest of taps when I had not moved for minutes. I defaulted to the story that most honoured my wish to be unremarkable. Rain in vents, shifts in air pressure, houses settling. The old explanations are outdated because they are ineffective. The third night, I woke with my left leg stretched off the mattress, heel propped on air, calf muscle lengthened like a promise. The stretch was the exact stretch from the bunker, the one that let my foot meet cold stair air. I did not turn on the light. When I reached for the switch did not click. It worked perfectly the next morning. Faults happen. Everything is a system, and systems fail. I built a cathedral out of sensible reasons and then moved into it because it was better at weatherproofing than the bunker had been. Saturday came bright and false, and I decided to go back to the station because some geometries force a return. If I could stand there in sunlight and see angles and distances, I could sort fear into a pile labelled stories I tell myself. The park hosted afternoon families. The fence had a new blue twine tie in one place, the kind of repair that says, "I see you and I do not want to see you again." Our trail was a faint rash at the platform edge where water had pooled. When I crouched, I saw a hairline crack I swear wasn't there before. A thin vein that ran from the fence post foot across the concrete toward the stairs and then down into the darkness. The hairline crack widening where the top step hid its mouth. I put a finger over it, and the concrete felt like the skin on milk. There is a library in town with metal shelves and a local history section that smells like people who haven't slept much. I went there because rituals matter. I took down a book with a photo of the station. New, all clean lines, and the flagstone pride of war. Men in hats, mouths like opinions. The caption spoke of ordnance shuttled under the trees. Another book featured a map with tunnel lines that resembled veins. A newspaper cutting discreetly avoided the word explosion and used the word incident in italics because caution is a British virtue. It named no dead and wrote about repairs as if the repairs were the actual event. I copied none of this. If you become a collector of facts, you risk having to trade them for sleep. That night, rain returned as if it had merely gone inside for a coat. Joss posted a photo in the group chat. The car park at the station fence shot at arm's length. 6 hooded shapes gleaming with water made bright by the flash. The wall, a grey thought in the corner. I waited to find the cheap trick. The thing in these stories where an extra head floats over a shoulder, or where a left hand is holding a right hand unaccountably. There was nothing like that. It was just us, and the pressure of pretending friendship made us safe. Between Levi and Ollie, the rain caught the light in a curve. 5 bright ovals like beads on a string. A tilt in the air that looked like toe ends if you wanted toe ends. I typed, "Nice artifact. Flash makes weird patterns." And then I deleted it and put my phone face down, listening to the far, thin voice of metal being taught to be quiet. Go back. Hannah wrote to me privately just after midnight. One more time. Stay in control. When I asked her what she meant by in control, she sent me a list. Flour for footprints, chalk, a string we could stretch across the stairway, tiny bells if we could find them, a flashlight for each person with fresh batteries, and a whistle that we would agree would mean out now. She added, no drinking and no testing. Then she emphasized, promise. I agreed to promises that someone might reasonably break, and this time, I kept them. We gathered in the car park at 11 with every valuable piece of seriousness we could borrow from films, and the rain obliged us by not yet beginning. The fence let us in on the third try with only a small gap. The slab slid more easily than I wanted it to. We placed a line of chalk at the top of the stairs to see who scuffed and where. We scattered flour in a shallow halo on the concrete above the stair mouth and a little on the first 2 steps, dust that made the air smell like the 3 a.m. of bakeries. We pegged twine across the opening at knee height and fastened 3 light brass bells that had been a joke earlier in Hannah's kitchen and were no joke now. We were careful, because care can be worn like armor, even when it is made of paper. We went down. The bunker made its old greeting, the air shrinking to keep us, and we sat in a closer ring than before. Our phones went to airplane mode. We kept one head torch on, held low, pointed away, a pale coin rolling slowly around the floor under Cam's hand, whenever it made him too brave or too afraid. We told ourselves we'd stay till 3, then leave. On paper, that is a plan. In practice, a plan is a prayer you'd like the world to agree to. At 1:30, rain began, the sound of a crowd remembering its job. At 1:40, a fox barked twice, the rude, slight cough that always sounds like ridicule. At 1:58, someone at the top of the stairs breathed and took a step. Pads, not shoes. Wet adhesion and release. The rhythm exact enough that it could have been the same steps written over with tracing paper. The light from the one torch did not reach the opening. The bells trembled, as if a gust had thought about being a gust, and then regretted it. They did not ring. The twine resisted something I could not see, and then bowed a fraction. The first step on the concrete above us left no sound. The second aligned with the chalk line we'd drawn and did not scuff it. The third pressed a little flour over the edge. Not a smudge of a toe. Not a heel. Just that faint shimmering of air that sometimes lifts dust when you run a hand through it and withdraw before anyone notices. Ranger, Levi whispered, but the word couldn't find itself. Hannah's thumbnail stopped ticking entirely. I could hear Joss whisper swear against the back of his teeth. The S sound stretched thin. The torchlight made a bright coin on the floor roll, and then it found the desk leg and halted with a small, gasping click. We waited for the bells to tell us a story about how bells work. They didn't. The twine bowed a little more, then sprang back a fraction, as if something had leaned to examine the knot and approved the craftsmanship. The flower on the first step was considered to be moving, but it was decided to remain as flower. Silence. Rain. Silence again. The kind of silence that contains a question mark. "What do you want?" Cam whispered, and in the exact moment I wished he hadn't, and I wanted very badly to know. It was the kind of question you ask about a body of water you know you will fall into. No one answered. The stare remained a square mouth that ate light and refused to chew. The steps resumed, backwards in the quiet way of maps, away from us, toward the fence. The first bell gave the faintest sound, the way a memory offers you a half second of a face and then takes it back. When the wall spoke, it did it in the thinner voice again, a practice voice, a voice that had learned our pitch and then subtracted it. I wanted that to be cleverness. I didn't want it to be an imitation. We held the plan until 3 and then did the brave thing. We left. The chalk line at the stair mouth remained unscuffed except for 3 small places where our own boots had been clumsier than our intentions. The flower had gathered itself into a series of breaks that could have been the passage of a draft, or the memory of the passage of a draft. The bells were still close to where we'd tied them, cord fibers faintly bright, where something had polished them with attention. Outside, the rain did that thing where it makes every surface belong to a single animal. The concrete shone, and the car park was a black plain. Our inbound prints were clear and crowded, and we were embarrassed. There was a 7th set again, bare, deliberate, neat. It padded from the fence to the stairs, paused, turned, and returned. The space between the left and right was constant in every step, as if placed by something that had learned the measure once and never needed to measure again. In the flower halo we'd cast on the platform lip, the prints did not appear. I knelt and felt cold rise, and in the cold was the shape of 5 long ovals in a slight curve inside my knee where my jeans darkened. I knew better than to touch it. No one spoke very much on the walk back to the road. Hannah said lightly, as if discussing something on an exam, "We were 6. She said it twice. Later, on the ride home, she texted, "Tell me the names." I wrote them. Me, Joss, Hannah, Cam, Levi, Ollie. I read them. I nearly added a 7th. My brain offered me a syllable, a vowel like a root. I erased the message, typed the names one more time, and sent them without a 7th. I slept poorly and woke up with my left foot pressed against the wall, toes curled as if feeling for an edge that had not been offered. The days after belonged to the game where you repair the world with plausible seams. I made coffee more loudly than necessary. I became excellent at making light switches behave. I answered emails in sentences that proved my competence at existing inside the small-made thing that is a job. I told no one at work, and no one told me the things they didn't tell. At night, I did not go to the window when the fence, which does not exist on my street, sang a thinner, willing note made of pipes learning the rain's orders. When my phone surfaced a memory from 2 summers ago, a photo of us by the river, 6, and asked if I wanted to revisit the day, I closed it as if it had been a door. When you keep a secret, the secret keeps you. It comes with you to the shops. It stands behind you at the sink while you rinse an apple. It sits on the bath edge and watches your ankle invent the shape of a step. I began to count without meaning to. Standing in line, 5 ahead, I am 6. At a table, 5 plus me. In a photo I hadn't looked at before, 5 in a row, and me taking the picture. I would not count to 7. It wasn't a superstition. It was a refusal to hand over a number like a key. The next rain came in a theatrical fit, with wind pushing it along like a bully. I left my window open by accident, and the room smelled like a hairline crack. I sat up and listened for the fence, for the stair, for the bells we hadn't brought home, but that now seemed to hang on the hinge of my bedroom door. The sound came, a thinner, practiced metal voice, not here and not in the park, but in the place that sits between 2 dark rooms and is neither. I lay back, and in the dark, my foot remembered the exact degree to extend. If I had moved it 1 inch further, I would have believed in the stairs even more than the mattress. I went back to the station one more time, alone, in an hour that belonged to no one. Dawn was a bruise that hadn't decided what colour to be. The fence had a new notice with a lot of words that you could tell the ranger had copied from somewhere. The slab that made the stair mouth had been moved back to place and then weighted with a concrete block, and the block had been marked with yellow tape. I rested my palm on it. The block was warmer than the morning. There were no prints. That was either good news or a new kind of news. By the car park, the patch of ground that had taken our exit prints had dried and held 1,000 different tread patterns like a gallery of careless habits. I found our boots if I lied to myself about which edges were sharp. I found the pads if I taught myself not to need to. There is a way the human mind places things in patterns that make them livable, and there is a way the human mind refuses to when patterns begin to break down. On the walk home, a robin did what robins do in autumn and performed, looking small and brave at the same time. I thought of the local history books and their italic incident. I thought of a line on a map that had been a tunnel, and now is only a memory of a tunnel, and how memories sometimes continue to be used as if they were still the thing. I thought of the first Screech, which was ours, and the second, which wasn't, and the third, which was close and wrong in the way imitations often are at first. People will say, it was a ranger without a torch who prefers bare feet, because he is of a type that chooses them, and he came to the stairs and thought better of the whole business and went away. They will say, the prints were the trick of water and the tread under the concrete, surface tension being clever where no one asked it to be. They will say, your light switch failed and then worked because electricity isn't a morality tale. They will say, cats or foxes or teenagers with nothing good to do and a taste for the ornaments of haunting. These are good stories. I say them to myself too. I am fluent in reasonable. But in the rain, when midnight has lost its manners and the house holds its breath with me, I count. I count me, Joss, Hannah, Cam, Levi, and Ollie. I stop there. I don't say 7. I do not, even in the privacy of thought, say a name. Outside, in the place to my right where the world slants toward an old rail line that I have to pretend is nothing but dirt now, a metal sound makes a smaller version of itself, and all the fences of the world lean inward a fraction. Like listeners, my ankle lifts without me and remembers where it learned to wait, toes bending over the edge of a step that might be a stair and might be the seam between two kinds of dark. The last thing I will tell you is a thing I cannot prove. It is a small thing, which is the kind of thing that is most often true. 3 nights ago, the rain wrote a thin white skin on my street, and a delivery driver brought a box I hadn't ordered and left it against my door with a polite photo to show he cared. When I opened the door, the box made a dry rectangle on the wet step. On the street beyond, someone had walked very neatly from one patch of shadow to another and not crossed the light. There were no prints in the rain, only the shape the rain had not dared write in. A gap repeated at the same interval down the road, like something placing itself with practice rather than with legs. I shut the door, went to my living room, turned on the lamp, counted friends, stopped at 6, placed my foot against the sofa, and told the wall it could keep thinking as long as it wanted. if it would agree to do it quietly. We were 6. We are 6. The number holds. It holds until it rains.